Hey.
Alright, Chio, so this video was inspired by this tweet that I saw a couple days ago, pretty much just asking the question, who would you rather build a team around, having the knowledge that you have now? Would you rather build around Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or Bam Adebayo? And usually I stray away from these sorts of discussions, these sorts of questions, but I found this one particularly intriguing, and then my brain started going down a whole different path, so I thought I'd make a video out of it. First though, I just want to get some background on each player to get everyone caught up to speed, just in case you aren't aware of who Bam Adebayo or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is for some reason. Starting with Bam, he was taken 14th in the 2017 NBA draft, and he was picked by the Heat. He played well enough in his first 4 seasons that he earned a 5-year, $160 million extension, which his first year of that will be kicking in on this next season. In 2020, he had his lone All-Star appearance, and then for the past 2 seasons as well, he's been on the All-Defensive second team, so he's already starting to accumulate some accolades at the young age of 23. And in the most recent season, he finished with averages of 18 points, which was a career high, to go with 9 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2 stocks per game. Bam Adebayo really made a name for himself in the NBA though during the 2020 season bubble run, where the Miami Heat went all the way to the NBA Finals, where they would eventually end up losing to the Los Angeles Lakers, in part due to the fact that Bam Adebayo suffered a shoulder injury, so he was pretty much rendered useless for the series. And that was extremely unfortunate as well, because in just the series prior in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Boston Celtics, Bam Adebayo was playing at the highest level of his young career so far. He averaged 22 points, 11 rebounds, and 5 assists on 60% shooting from the field, and in the 6 games against the Celtics, pretty much whatever they tried to throw at him, Bam just absolutely destroyed it, wrecked every sort of defensive scheme, every sort of offensive scheme that was, again, just thrown at him by the Celtics. It was a huge chess match between Spoelstra and Brad Stevens, but Bam Adebayo ended up being the best player in that series. Jumping back to current day though, Bam is by no means a perfect player. While he's still great and he still has plenty of room to grow and improve as a player, there are still some flaws to his game. Bam's playstyle labels him as one of the better examples of the modern NBA big, just because of the fact that he is very athletic, he's absolutely dominant on the defensive side of the ball, he can play make, he can get to the rim with ease relative to other big men, but the point where it all falls apart is that he has a very, very clear lack of aggression for most of the time, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and we've seen his teammates in the past get upset and just be unhappy about that. Because the frustrating part is that he's proved in certain flashes time and time again that he's capable of driving to the rim and punishing small defenders, and then he's also capable of hitting mid-range shots and even 3-pointers on occasion as well. Yet there will be stretches of multiple games at a time where Bam Adebayo simply just doesn't take enough shots, and it definitely hurts the Miami offense that has seen its struggles over the past couple of seasons. But if he is eventually able to iron out these issues and become the great player that so many Heat fans want him to become, I certainly don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities that we could be seeing a 20, 12, and 6 with 2 stocks per game stat line from him for a full season. And now we're going to switch over to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He was taken 11th overall in the year after Bam, which was 2018, so there's a similarity between the two that they were both late lottery draft picks. But while Adebayo has spent his entire career so far with the Miami Heat, Shai Gilgeous' career has had a few more stops to them. He was initially picked by the Charlotte Hornets, but was then traded to the LA Clippers for Miles Bridges and some other picks. Then once he got to LA, he ended up starting 73 games as a rookie and would finish the year with a 10-3-3 stat line. Not to mention, if you remember correctly, that was the year that the Clippers barely made it into the playoffs, ended up playing the absolutely stacked Golden State Warriors with Klay, Steph, KD, Draymond, all those guys, and he actually ended up having 3 games with over 18 points in that series. So again, as a rookie, showed out in the playoffs against the eventual Western Conference champions. But even after that promising rookie season, he was shipped off in the offseason in the infamous Paul George trade, where he was sent to Oklahoma City along with Danilo Gallinari, and just so many picks. But this might have actually been a really good thing for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and his career. And I say that because he didn't really quite miss a beat in his first season in Oklahoma City. That was the year, just last season, where they had Chris Paul, Danilo Gallinari, they had Dennis Schroeder come off the bench, Steven Adams. that whole just kind of ragtag group worked together, made it to the first round as a 5 seed in the playoffs, and they forced the Houston Rockets to 7 games, who everyone thought was a way better team. Obviously, Chris Paul, that's where he started to get a lot of his flowers, but Shai played great as well. Even if they did eventually lose the series, as I said, in 7 games, still another great year of learning experience and high-intensity basketball for SGA. So just in case, to recap Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's career to this point, just 2 years in, has already started in 143 different games, averaged 30 plus minutes in all of those games, made it to the playoffs twice, and had 1 full year where he was able to learn from one of the highest IQ players to ever play the game of basketball in Chris Paul, which all sounds pretty damn good to me. Then obviously in the last offseason we had Oklahoma City Thunder pretty much blew everything up, went full rebuild mode, but held on to SGA to be their centerpiece. And he definitely delivered in that first season as the main guy. In this past season, he played 35 games before missing the rest of the season with a foot injury, and in those 35 games, he averaged a career-high 24 points to go along with 5 rebounds and a career-high 6 assists. Not to mention, he would have been a 50-40-90 guy if he had just completed one more of those categories, but unfortunately, he was only an 80% foul shooter. The most impressive thing that stands out to me, though, was the 6 assists that he averaged, because if you look back at his previous 2 seasons, his career high was 3.3 assists. So definitely a huge jump, pretty much doubled his assist numbers, and obviously a shortened game sample size, only 35 games. But I think that obviously he's going to continue to grow and improve. So I wouldn't be surprised if he can get near maybe 8 assists per game for the rest of his career. But again, now that we have some of that background stuff out of the way, we can go back to the original question. Who would you want to build a team around in today's NBA? Would it be SGA or Bam? And I think it's actually kind of funny because if you look at these two players, they're kind of opposites in a sense. Obviously, one's a guard, one's a center. In terms of just play styles, Bam is obviously dominant on the defensive side of the ball and is currently working on improving his offensive game, whereas Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is pretty dominant on the offensive side of the ball and still needs to get some work on his defensive side of the game. Either way, I'm here to say I had an answer in my head prior to doing any sort of research or making this video, and after doing all that stuff, my answer still hasn't changed. Before I say who I'm taking, I just want to say, obviously this is no slander towards the other player. They're both really good in their own respective ways. But with that being said, I think I'm pretty easily taking Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in this case. Not only do I think Shai has a higher ceiling than Bam, just ever so slightly, but honestly, like I said in the start of the video, it started with this conversation, but my mind quickly went to a deeper thought of just essentially comparing star guards to star big men. Because across the history of the NBA, most decades, it was pretty safe to say that if you got yourself a star big man, that your team would be in contention for quite some time. But I think as the game has evolved and as people have, gone away from the rim, and now we have guys taking 40-foot shots and putting people on mixtapes, that, the game has evolved, the game has changed. And I think now there's more of a balance between who you need on your team rather than just getting, one-star big men to dominate the paint on both ends. Even when just looking at the current state of the 2021 playoffs, you can see many cases where guards beat out bigs. But we can see it in both conferences. In the Eastern Conference, we saw the Trae Young-led Hawks go to 6 games in the Eastern Conference Finals, and then in the Western Conference, we saw the CP3 and Devin Booker-led Suns go all the way to the NBA Finals where they're currently up 1 game. And who did these teams beat to get there? The Suns beat the MVP big man Nikola Jokic, and yes, I understand the Nuggets were heavily damaged by injuries, but that doesn't fit my narrative, so I'm just gonna act like we're just gonna keep on going. And then the Hawks beat the MVP runner-up, who's also a big man, in Joel Embiid. And again, yes, I understand that he was playing with a partially torn meniscus, but again, I need my narrative to live here. But if that's not enough for you, we can look back at all of the recent NBA Finals matchups and just look through the teams to see what positions each star player for each team played at. Last year we had the Heat and Lakers, and this is probably a good case for the big men side of the argument because we saw Anthony Davis, we saw Bam Adebayo, although I don't know if I'd necessarily classify him as a star at that point in his career, but we definitely saw Anthony Davis be at least a number 2 option for his team and be a pretty dominant big man, even though he's one of the more evolved big men and doesn't just sit in the paint for most of the game. The year before that, we saw the Warriors and the Raptors, where it was Kawhi Leonard and Kyle Lowry who teamed up to win the championship. So there's one for the guards. You had Kyle Lowry, who was the second option. Not necessarily a huge scoring threat, but again, a very, very good guard. On the Warriors side of things, they had Steph Curry, Kevin Durant. I'm not counting Kevin Durant as a big man. He's just a really, really tall wing that plays like a guard. And then Steph Curry, you could say that's a win for the guard side of things, but Steph Curry is also just kind of an anomaly in himself. If you look at the Cleveland Cavaliers teams that made the finals, 4 years in a row, they had LeBron, who's definitely a wing. You could say they had Kevin Love, but Kevin Love was a third option on all of those teams. It was Kyrie Irving, another guard, who helped propel them to the finals and win a few, or at least, they win one ring. I don't know why I was going for multiple rings there. They won one. And then prior to all of those Warriors-Cavs matchups, the Spurs won it. And while you could argue that Tim Duncan was one of the centerpieces of that team, at 37 years old, I'm just going to hesitate to call him a star player. They had Kawhi, who was only 22, not really a star player either. The Spurs they just don't really fit this whole discussion, to be honest. But if you look at the Heat team that made 4 finals out of the Eastern Conference from 2011 to 2014, it was, again, LeBron James with a guard as his second option in Dwayne Wade. You could argue, again, Chris Bosh for the big side of things, but while he is an all-star level player, he was the third option on that team, and very clearly was. In 2012, we saw the Young Thunder in the finals, but again, that was KD, Westbrook, and then James Harden off the bench. To get a true big man, star big man who won the finals for his team as the main guy, you have to go all the way back to 2011 with Dirk Nowitzki on the Mavericks, and that's the first true win that you have for the big side of things. But even just looking back over the past decade, you can't necessarily even say that the guards did a whole lot better, because a lot of the guards I listed were second options at best. Curry, you can maybe argue that he was the first option on a few of those teams. He definitely was in 2015, but again, Steph Curry is just kind of an anomaly, so I don't really know how okay I feel with counting him as a guard, just because he is just so much more than just a basic star point guard. So in conclusion, I don't even know if I really came to a conclusion by talking about all those recent finals runs. I guess I sort of reinforced my choice of picking Shai over Bam Adebayo, just because we've seen so many more guards be on NBA Finals teams as at least a top 2 option, whereas having a true center or big man, they've only shown up a handful of times over the last decade. I mean, if you go back to like early 2000s, 90s, 80s, you'd see a whole lot more, but we're living in today. We're going towards the future, so you have to plan for the future, and all those reasons combined, again, I'm taking Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in this one case between him and Bam Adebayo. I'm not going to hate you if you go with Bam Adebayo. Again, at the end of the day, this is all subjective. I just thought it was a fun little question that ended in a fun little thought exercise for me to go through.